É nosso convidado nesta conferência Guy Verhofstadt, ex-primeiro-ministro da Bélgica e deputado europeu. Welcome, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much at organizing a media company and a newspaper for inviting me on this social conference social conference and the fight against inequality. I have also tried to follow a little bit what the Secretary of State was saying. My Portuguese is very bad, but I have understood quite a lot. So you speak a Portuguese that even a Flemish can understand. So thank you very much. So my start of this is, are we at the brink of a new economic and social crisis worldwide and in Europe? And what needs to be done in the upcoming years in Europe? What reforms, what type of European Union we need to tackle this new economic and social crisis that we see already before us, and the inequalities who are a consequence of it. And I want to start I have a few slides prepared, but I want to start, in fact, by, it doesn't work very well. I want to start with saying, what we are living today is a new world order. So what we are facing is a crisis, economic, social crisis, in a world order which is completely different of the world order of the past. The world order of the past was the Cold War between 45 and 89, was the so-called victory of liberal democracy and free market economy between 1989 and today. And what we see today is, in fact, a new world order that is completely breaking with the past. And it's a new world order. I call it a new age of empires, a world order based on empires. This new world order is not a world with a competition between 199 nation states, that are the number of nation states that are members of the United Nations. No, the new world order will be a competition between 4-5 big blocs, continental blocs, and it will be a competition not only politically, not only military, but also economically, socially, on the technological field, certainly, in space, on Earth. So it will be a fight between big empires, like, for example, China. China is not a nation, and China is a civilization, Han civilization, with inside hundreds of different ethnies, as we know. India, for example, to give a second example, it's not a nation either. It's a big continent. It's the biggest democracy, but with 2,000 nations and ethnies inside, with 20 languages spoken. We always think it's only in Europe that we have different languages. Well, it's not true. In India, there are 20 different languages. And at the same time, there are 4 big religions in India. So that's the biggest democracy in the world, still a democracy in the world. And then you have the US. The US is also more than a nation. It's an empire on itself, as we know. And Russia, who want to become an empire. So the world of tomorrow will be a very insecure place, a very difficult place, a place of inequality, of fight, of competition between big different views on society, autocrats against democrats, and not only politically, but also a competition, like I said, economically and even on technology. And at the same time, in this new world order, what we see is a growing trend of populism inside our societies, driven, I think, by the social media. Social media with their algorithms who are in fact destroying, I should say, the debate in liberal democracies. as we know them today. And it's a very strange moment to say that here in Portugal, in Porto, because today we have the midterm elections in the United States of America. It's difficult to make a prediction, but I will not be surprised if there is a new push of populism inside these midterm elections. Because today American politics is really a fight between a fight for democracy at one hand and a fight for autocracy, populism at the other hand. But it's not only in the United States, we see it also in Europe. The new government in Italy is, I can say, an extreme right-wing government. I am not exaggerating, I think, for once. And we see the same trend in a number of other countries. So what we are seeing is, at the one hand, a world who is in fact an unsecure place. An individual country has no security anymore if it is not part of a bloc. If it is not part of an international organization, it can be the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, it can be the European Union, it can be whatever, but to be part of one of the big blocs is a necessity for security in the world of tomorrow. And at the same time, we see inside our societies this growing populism that will use, in fact, the social crisis, the energy crisis that we are facing today to gain more votes, to gain more power in our societies. And the question is, this double threat that we have, at the one hand, this new age of empires, and at the other hand, this wave of populism in our societies driven by this social media. What is the place of Europe in it? What needs Europe to do? How to secure the interest of all citizens, of our companies, how to create a more stable, a more secure, a more equal Europe inside this new world order of tomorrow. And that brings me to my next slide, because be aware I will not talk about everything this morning, but personally I think that we absolutely need, as fast as possible, a reform of the European Union, and what I call a new European governance that is based on essentially 5 big building blocks. But like I said, I will not touch all of the building blocks today, because otherwise I think that I will miss my plane for Brussels later this day. I will not talk about what is, in my opinion, one of the key necessities also. There's a defense union, as we see it since the outbreak of the war. Because defense union will not give you the figures, but that defense in Europe is maybe the biggest waste of money that exists, with 27 member states duplicating itself the whole time. And so a defense union makes part of it. Like makes part of it also a health union. That we have seen after the pandemic, after COVID. Before COVID, everybody said, no. Health and health issues, that's a national issue. That needs to be done by member states. That is absolutely a non-go area for the European Union. Since the pandemic, everybody says, no. That is something that needs to be done by Europe and by the European Union. So a health union is certainly on the map also for this new EU governance. Now, what I want to talk about are the 3 other building blocks this morning. That is the fiscal union, with an absolute social pillar in the heart of it, as needed to tackle the economic challenges that we will face in the coming years and the coming decades. Then secondly, an energy union, because we are in the middle of an energy crisis, and everything what is done today to tackle this increase of energy prices can only be done in the right way if we establish the fastest as possible a real energy union inside the European Union. And then thirdly, the political union, because my opinion is that you cannot create this new governance, you cannot create a defense union, not the fiscal union, not the social pillar, not the health union, and certainly not the energy union, if there is first of all not a change in our rules, a change in our institutions. I know that European politicians don't like to talk about this. They are saying, no, it's about policies, it's not about institutions. But I'm always saying, it's true, it's about policies and not about institutions. But bad institutions create bad policies and lead to bad policies. So if you want to change your policies, if you want to have a social pillar, if you want to have a more sustainable policies in the Union, first of all, you need to tackle also your institutional deadlock in which we are today. And I come back to this institutional deadlock because I got the possibility this morning to make a little list of all the files that are blocked today because of the institutional deadlock in the European Union. And that goes from the migration agreement that we don't have. It's already 7 years blocked today in the European Union. It goes to the 18 billion euro aid that you want to give to Ukraine, blocked by a country. That goes into I am always I give you now the list instead of at the end of my speech. The idea to have a minimal taxation on the international level, the 15%, an international agreement that has been made, blocked in the European Union, the extension of Schengen to a number of other countries like Bulgaria, Romania, blocked in the European Union, and I can go further, but I don't want to make the depression as too big in the room this morning. But let me start by the first of the big reforms we absolutely need. That is the fiscal union with a strong social pillar. And why is that needed? After the pandemic and the COVID, I think we reacted quite in a good manner. It was not instantly, but after a few months, we had a common purchase of vaccines, good development, and then we created, to manage the fallout of the pandemic, this COVID fund, COVID recovery fund, with a total amount of 750 billion of euro to help, in fact, the member states to overcome the economic and social fallout of this COVID crisis. And that was an enormous shift and break with the previous crisis. The previous crisis was the financial crisis. You know that the financial crisis has taken 10 years in Europe before we really acted. And in the meanwhile, we have still not a full banking union as an outcome of this financial crisis. And we can say that in contradiction to the financial crisis, in the COVID crisis, we acted for Europeans quite fast. And we created a COVID recovery fund of 750 billion. But it is a temporary fund. They have decided on the European level that it's for once that we will do it. That for once we will use 750 billion. To put that in perspective, the 750 billion, that is in fact on a yearly base 1% of European GDP. 1%. So the European budget today is 150 billion. That's 1% of European GDP. By making a COVID fund of 750 billion that we will use for 5 years, not difficult, even I as a lawyer, I can do the mathematics. The 750 divided by 5 creates, again, 150 billion. So what we do with the COVID fund is we double, in fact, the capacity of the European Union. We have 1% in the ordinary budget, and we add with the COVID fund for 5 years 150 billion to help member states to overcome the fallout of this pandemic. So that's, again, 150. We go from 1% to 2% of European GDP if, and that is my point, and the need, and the point that I want to make here this morning, the need to make this permanent, to make this fiscal capacity a permanent tool so that we go from 1% to 2% of the European GDP in the European possibilities, the financial possibilities of the Union. And how to finance that with European bonds and with own resources. And one of the own resources that I want to raise this morning that is absolutely key for a real more social equality on the world level is what I call a CBEM that we are discussing for the moment across a carbon border adjustment mechanism, what gives the possibility when products with a far bigger footprint, ecological footprint, enter our markets, we can tax them with a minimum tax. Or, for example, when goods come in that have been produced in bad working conditions, for example, we can do exactly the same so that we create income in the European Union based on ecological and social standards in the world. And that will give the possibility to make this fiscal capacity of 1% above the ordinary budget of 1% of the European Union permanent, and to tackle, for example, the fallout of the war in Ukraine, the energy crisis we are facing today. And what comes tomorrow will come tomorrow. I'm pretty sure that in 5 years and in 10 years there will be another crisis, there will be another challenge. There is a climate change challenge, which is an enormous challenge that we can use for this permanent investment capacity. And then the second element of this fiscal union is naturally a social pillar. And to understand what the social pillar means, I have here this small slide. So it's a pillar. I want to pay tribute, by the way, to the Portuguese government and the Portuguese presidency, because they were the first to organize a summit here in Porto. So it's not by accident that we are back in Porto on the social policy and the social pillar of the European Union. But 9 on 10 of the Europeans, in fact, are asking for a social Europe. 9 on 10. It's clear that the lack of a real social Europe is one of the reasons for the rising populism in the European Union. And that means a European pillar of social rights based on equal opportunities, access to the labor market as one, fair working conditions, social protection and inclusion, including a social minimum income as the basis for such a social pillar. And this is not only necessary for social reasons, for reasons of equality, but it is also necessary for economic reasons. Why? Because the labor mobility will increase with such a social pillar. People are always saying, and many people were saying that, yeah, you have or the economy or social policies. And they make, in fact, a contradiction and an opposition between the one and the other, saying if you have too much social policies, that will be a bad thing for your economic policies. Or if you're only concentrated on economy, you will not have a view on the social dimension of your economic policies. My point is that for economic growth in Europe, we need the social pillar the fastest as possible, because labor mobility will increase in Europe if we have a social pillar. And it's because we have none of this, not enough of such a social pillar in the European Union, that we have a low labor mobility. The labor mobility in Europe, ladies and gentlemen, today is 1%. That means that by the end of the year, 1% of the European Union citizens are working in another place, in another country, than in the beginning of the year. That's the labor mobility, 1%. In the United States of America, to give you an example, it's 10%. So by the end of the year, 10% of the Americans live and work in another state than before, than in the beginning of the year. And that creates an enormous problem and an enormous challenge in Europe. That means that we have, even today, millions of vacancies in the European Union. Vacancies that are not filled in and that are causing an enormous drop in economic growth. We estimated today, because of the low labor mobility, and because of the absence of real transferable social rights, pension rights inside the European Union, we estimate that we lose more or less 1% of economic growth in the European Union because of the absence of labor mobility and the absence of transferable social and pension rights. So the reason to do this is not only social, it's also economical, a question of economic survival. That's also the reason I will not tackle that problem, that on the migration issue, we need as fast as possible a legal migration policy in the European Union. Routes to the European Union with legal migration, instead of the abuse of asylum systems as we see because of the absence of legal migration routes to the European Union. And that brings me then to my next point. No, I'm going to now return, first of all. That is, no, absolutely not that, neither. No, that's absolutely not what I want. And that's back to this, my fiscal union with a strong social pillar. That is, the next points of this fiscal union is the completion of the single market and the new competition rules. And there, I mean, there is an absolutely need, as already indicated, that also on technology, on internet, on mobile, we take again the lead in Europe. Today we are simply copying, using the models of the American big tech companies and hopefully not of the Chinese tech companies in the future. And there is an absolutely key need to develop our own model, a model that is not based on, okay, I give my data for free to the big tech companies in America, and they are making the profits with it as we see it from today. So the fiscal union with a strong social pillar is an absolutely key request to survive the new age of empires and at the same time to tackle populism inside the European Union. And the second is the energy union. Energy union, that is a key issue of today. You have to know that the energy union was already decided in Europe in 2006. I remember it. It was the last summit of Tony Blair as the Prime Minister of the UK, and he organized a summit in Hampton Court, a beautiful castle near to London. And there we decided, from now on, we have an energy union. And instead of creating an energy union, what happened was exactly the opposite. We became more dependent from the outside world. We became more dependent from Russian gas, from Russian fossils. And the problem with Russian fossils is very simple. It's Russian and it's fossil. So there are two problems with it. And the only way to get rid of this is to establish an energy union. What you see today is that the European Union tries to react to its dependence on fossils and especially on Russian gas and Russian oil, and is using a few tools. One of the tools is, we want to create a price cap. Very well. But it will be a dynamic price corridor. And then I'm already saying, oh, what is this? Is it a price cap or is it a dynamic price corridor? Because if the corridor is like that, there is no price cap at all. And secondly, we will do a common purchase of energy. For what percentage? Obviously, for 15%. I would say, do the opposite. Do 85% of common purchase and give the possibility to member states to go to the spot market for 15%. So I think what we need is a real energy union and not the patchwork that we are seeing today, where we are discussing between energy ministers for months now an energy cap who will not be a cap, or a common purchase who will not be a common purchase. It's not necessary to create such tools if they are not real, if they are not substantial. A real energy union, in my opinion, that is my next slide, is in fact based on three things. First of all, an energy purchase platform, and like I said, for not the 100%, but at least for 85% of the purchases, because that creates the purchasing power of Europe. Why we are paying the double of the energy prices as Asia, double. For the simple reason that we don't use our common purchasing power and that every country individually is negotiating its contracts. And the second one we need is a European Energy Security Fund that is investing in common grids, in new renewables. The whole discussion, for example, to create a pipeline from Portugal to Germany with the problems with France, who is saying, yeah, but I don't like that. It would be better that Germany is buying energy in France instead of importing LNG through Portugal and through Spain and through France, is a typical example of the absence of a European grid, of the absence of European policy. So a European Energy Security Fund that is investing in common grids and is investing in renewables is absolutely key. And then last, and maybe the most important for the moment, to avoid a social crisis in the European Union is a European Union energy assistance plan, as we did with COVID, exactly based on the same logic, giving loans, giving grants for the protection of households, for the protection of companies to overcome the energy crisis we have today and the social consequences of the energy crisis. And if we don't do that in common, because until today there is no proposal, no plan on the table to do that in common, every country will do it separately, like the Germans already announced. And the consequence will be a huge competition on our single market. But the competition, not fair competition, because countries with good public finances will have the possibility to do an enormous assistance plan, and countries with difficult public finances will have no possibility at all to make such an assistance plan, what will create new tensions on our single market, and an unfair competition will be created in a number of our sectors. So this European Energy Assistance Plan is key in the coming years. And a real energy union is an energy union that is a common purchase platform and a security fund for investment in grids, and at the same time a common assistance to households on the European level to avoid unfair competition on our single markets. And as I indicate, here we could use making the COVID fund permanent as the tool to finance this. So we don't need to invent something. We need simply to take the decision that the COVID fund, the system behind the COVID fund, this fiscal capacity of 1% a year becomes a permanent tool in Europe and will be used in the coming 5 years for the energy assistance plan at the one hand and the European Energy Security Fund at the other hand. And that brings me to what I already promised in the beginning, how to make this happen, how this fiscal union with a social pillar in the heart of it at the one hand, and at the other hand, an energy union. And I don't talk about the defense union, I talk about the health union, but that's the same story, exactly the same story, how to make it happen. And therefore, that brings me to my last slide, that is the necessity to create the fastest as possible a political union and to overcome the institutional obstacles we have. In fact, I have to tell you, in fact, the European Union doesn't exist today. What we call the union is not a union. It is still a patchwork of 27 member states deciding purely by unanimity. And even when in the treaties there is no unanimity condition foreseen, what is happening is that the member states between themselves decide for a unanimity as a condition. A typical example is migration. In fact, in the treaty, migration is not foreseen with unanimity. It can be done with qualified majority. But what happened is that in the council, they come together and say, it should be better that we decided with unanimity. Yes, that's true. It's always better. In a household also, in my family, it will be better that we decide everything, what my son, my daughter, my wife, everything together, 4 votes in favor, otherwise you don't do it. And the reality, that doesn't work, naturally. We need absolutely to get rid of unanimity and to have qualified majority as the only base for decision-making, besides a few exceptions. For example, the entrance of new member states in the Union. That could be, in the future, still unanimity. But all the other issues, tax matters, social matters, all the matters concerning energy, migration, all this need to be based on qualified majority. Otherwise, my little list that I have and that I have given you, internal taxation, international taxation, help to Ukraine, the migration package, the extension of Schengen, and so on, will still be blocked in the coming years. Like my second point is we need one presidency in the European Union. It's a bad thing, this competition between three institutions, three presidents, and what we have seen, you remember that, Sofagate, you remember that image? I don't have it with me. It's so awful, that picture of Sofagate in Ankara with Erdogan, von der Leyen, and the president of the European Council. And my third point is we need to abolish opt-ins and opt-outs. The European Union is like a menu card of a restaurant today. You go in and you say, yeah, the euro, yes, no. Schengen, maybe. Europol, It's like in the United States of America. Can you imagine that in the United States of America, California is saying, look, the dollar, I don't want the dollar, we're going to continue with the peseta. Because the peseta was, until the mid of the 19th century, a currency in California. Or, for example, Massachusetts is saying, look, FBI, that's a nice organization, but we're going to do it ourselves. And we're going to not participate in the FBI. Or whatever other policy in Europe. Well, that's exactly what is happening in Europe. Were countries saying, Europol, no, I have an opt-out. Schengen, no, I don't participate. The whole issue of Brexit was in fact, the consequence of the opt-ins and the opt-outs. Of a country, I went there as a Brexit negotiator, was Brexit negotiator for the European Parliament many times, and I said to the public many times, but you want to leave the European Union, but you are already outside the European Union. What is your problem with all your opt-outs that you have? So a bloc in the world of tomorrow, in a new age of empires, a bloc that has the possibility to be in and to be out, or for example, what happened with the European arrest warrant, where Mr. Berlusconi negotiated himself an exception for 10 years, because the European arrest warrant started in 2004, only in Italy it was only in 2014. And people said, yeah, why he does that? Because he has the fear that we will use it against him. That was the reason for 10 years. So no opt-ins, no opt-outs is, I think, the next thing that we need to do. And then last point, creating, now I'm completely lost in my slides, a transnational democracy with transnational lists. It's time that European citizens can not only vote, can not only elect their representatives on the European level, but that they can elect European politicians so that we can create a European demos. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you.